Howdy ESSM 406. In this lecture, I'm going to talk a little bit about bureaucrats. Now, bureaucrats are classically involved in what Rothman would call social planning, and I gave an example in my last lecture about bureaucrats involved in social planning for endangered species management. And I'm giving you actually two very different readings about bureaucrats. One is an article that I just published this year. I thought I should tell you a little bit about what I do. It's published in the journal World Development, and it's an article about my research among foresters in India. And in that article, I look at why foresters make the decisions they do, and I find they often are not making them because they are the best way. So I just gave this example. Bureaucrats are sitting around a room, a bunch of biologists working for the government. How can we manage this endangered species? And we'd like to think that they're sitting there, looking at what the science says. But what I'm going to tell you in the article I wrote is that bureaucrats are often not looking at the science. They may have distorted ideas about the science. There may not be appropriate science. But they may have incentives to make certain kinds of decisions. And I'm going to look at different reasons why they might make different kinds of decisions. And so what I want you to get out of that reading, aside from an idea of what your professor does when he's not teaching, which is often follow around decision makers and see how they make decisions about natural resource management, I want you to get the idea that, well, sometimes bureaucrats aren't going to make the right decisions. So this social planning mode that bureaucrats are engaged in may not always lead to good outcomes. Now, that may not be very surprising to you because in our country, there's an idea like calling someone a bureaucrat is kind of an insult almost. If you think about it, your professor works for the state of Texas. So you might think of me as a bureaucrat, but your high school teacher is a bureaucrat. Policemen are bureaucrats. Bureaucrat kind of just means like someone who works for a big organization, usually a government organization. But we think a bureaucrat as we have a narrower idea of a bureaucrat. A bureaucrat is someone who sits in an office and makes rules and gets in the way of everyone else, right? Well, even the bureaucrats I studied, they're foresters. They're actually spending their time out in the field managing these forests in India. But I also want to give you the idea that bureaucrats can be really innovative. They can make really good decisions sometimes. For that reason, I'm giving you an article by Rosemary O'Leary, who is now a distinguished professor at the University of Kansas. But this is quite an old article of hers from the Journal of Public Administration, Research and Theory. And in it, she's going to talk about how bureaucrats can actually engage in social action. They're supposed to just be doing the social planning role, but they played a very innovative role in finding new ways to solve some problems related to environmental regulation. And they got out of their mold. They did a lot of work behind the scenes. Maybe it wasn't quite what they were supposed to be doing according to their job descriptions, but they saw that there was a problem out there that needed to be fixed, and they decided they were going to take action to fix it. So I don't want you to get the wrong idea from reading my work that I think bureaucrats are bad people or are going to get in the way. We need to recognize that there's some limits to what this social planning mode can accomplish. We also need to recognize that sometimes this sort of rational deliberative process that I told you doesn't always happen can be a very powerful tool for making positive change. And there's many, many, many examples, and many of you are going to be working on problems where maybe the best solution to the problem is a couple bureaucrats, someone who works for the city or someone who works for the state or someone who works for the federal government. Few people need to sit down in a room together and make some really careful, thoughtful decisions. And they might be able to do that.